While we are waiting, can I ask one question?
Sure, Ji, sure.
So, I couldn't attend the last session. I watched the video. I think I
Okay.
heard like we will form some sort of groups and we could get some topics and we have to have some
Yes.
presentation and whatnot, right? So, have we done that? Like, have we made the group, sent out the topics? Like, I do not know where.
Not it,
No,
not it, not it.
no.
Not
Today
yet.
will be.
Today,
Yeah,
you okay, okay, sounds good. Yeah, thanks.
yeah. So Akshayji, after the class is done, please watch out for a message and a mail from us. We'll also post all the details on classroom with the assignment of the teams as well as the general area of topics that you
Okay,
can work on.
okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you all the logistics specifics of how long the presentation is and how to go about it. All of that will be explained in the message. Okay.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thanks.
Mhm. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Namaste. Thanks for joining on time. Um, I think we can get started now. I'll start off with the prarthana and then a couple of announcements, and then we'll move on to the class. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is session 4 of our IKS training and we'll continue on the wonderful set of presentations and knowledge that Smriti ji here has been disseminating. The couple of announcements I mentioned earlier, one of them is that we will send out. So next week, session 5 is the final session of the first module, which is the Bharatiya education, history, pedagogy, tradition, and so on. And we have sufficient material, and we will suggest the teams that you'll work with, and I'll send you all the information on what to do as part of the presentation slash discussion. I'll explain some of the topics that we had in mind, so you can pick and choose, and you can give it to your own kind of story. And target it towards a certain audience, right? We'll suggest that as well. So teams will be either 3 or 4 people, most likely 4 people right now, because we want to finish all the presentations in an hour and a half next week. So we'll be sending out. So watch out for your WhatsApp messages, mails, and so on. Updates will be everywhere, also in classrooms. So we'll also make sure that you've received all the information. Okay, so you can be part of the group. So that's the first thing. The second thing is next week, because Smriti ji has another commitment, she will join about 30 minutes. Oh, sorry, we'll start the class 30 minutes later. Okay, so there's a one-off thing. Instead of 7 a.m. Central Time, we'll be joining at 7:30 a.m. Central Time. Okay, so we want to push the class. I definitely would like her to be there to make comments about and give us feedback about the presentations that you're all doing. Okay, so we'll start at 7. Is that okay, Smriti ji? 7:30. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Shri, yes, Shri.
Okay, sounds good. All right. With that, we'll get started. Yeah, handing it off to you.
Namaste, everyone, and welcome back to the session. Today we are in the fourth session. I hope you're not bored looking at me every weekend. For a few more weekends, of course, I will be handling the sessions until we have a bit of a change of Acharya for a different subject. So I'm just sharing my screen here. Just to recap what we looked at in the previous session, I know a lot of terminologies were brought forth in the previous session. I think, yeah. So in the previous, this was a recap of whatever we had looked at before the last class in terms of the Ashtadasha Vidyasthana, the Shad Darshanas, and a little bit about the ancient Indian education system and what were the universities that were there and what does the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishad talk on education. We delved a little bit deeper into the theory of knowledge in the previous session, where we looked at why it is important to look at the structure of knowledge and the various sources of knowledge in terms of the ontology and the epistemology, right? And why it is critical or why it is important as a student of IKS to know the theory of knowledge, because that forms the foundation, be it whatever philosophical system or any of the sciences that we are going to look at, whether it is Ayurveda, whether it is astronomy or Ganit. There are certain valid sources of knowledge that are considered, and there is an ontological structure on which the knowledge system is built on, or the sciences are built on. And hence, it's important to know the theory of knowledge. And what is the source of knowledge is pramana, and what is to be known is pramaya. And what are the different sources of knowledge? We looked at Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Agama, Adhyapati, and Anupalapti. Pratyaksha is whatever we directly cognize through our senses, and Anumana is in terms of making inferences when the primary source of knowledge is not available or we are not able to directly cognize something. So we see the smoke on the mountain and we draw an inference that there is fire, because we know the inherent connection between the fire and the smoke. There is an entire body of knowledge to talk about this inherent connection. What is the fire? What is the mountain? What is the smoke and all that? And texts like, for example, Tarka Sangraha of Annam Bhatta, which draws inspiration from the Vaisheshika Sutras and a little bit of Nyaya as well, talk in detail about how this knowledge is structured. And Upamana is learning through analogy, through comparison. We took the example of a kiwi fruit and a sapota. Some people have eaten sapota, some people have eaten kiwi fruit, and if you have to tell one about the other, you would probably say it is like a kiwi fruit, but it tastes sour, or it tastes sweet. So like that, you have comparative learning. Agama, the word testimonial of the Rishis or the experts or the subject matter experts. And in fact, if we go through texts like Tarka Sangraha, it gives in detail about who is the person whose testimony can be considered as valid. If you look at a modern context, right, how would you say that this is a valid statement? Say, for example, E is equal to mc square, or anything for that matter. So it could be the law of thermodynamics, it could be the laws of motion, or whatever it is. How do we say that it is a valid statement? One, of course, we can test it out in the laboratory, but probably we don't have enough capacity or access or to test out something like, say, the genetic gene editing, or E is equal to MC square, or neutrinos, or whatever it is. It requires complex equipments, right? So what we do is that we rely on a statement of an expert. And who do we call an expert? There will be a peer of people who are scientific minded, who are rational thinkers, who are logical, who have this analytical thinking capability, who ask the right questions, and any disagreements, any confusions or incorrect knowledge is refuted. The truth is brought. So in amongst his circles, when Einstein is regarded that whatever he is saying is valid, it is then published in research papers, in magazines, it then comes into the textbook, and then we all study it as physics at different stages. And that is how we consider that to be a valid source of knowledge. So similarly, when we say Rishi Vakya, when we say Arsha Vakya, or when we talk about the works of the Rishis like Vagbhatta or Bhaskaracharya or Aryabhatta, it means that there has been a peer-reviewed process, a very, very strict protocol has been followed before this knowledge system has been made available to the larger audience for consumption. So when we say Agama, what is a qualified statement? What is a statement? What is a Vakya? What are the various components of a Vakya? All these are defined in the Shastras. Even Mimamsa talks about it. The Tarka Sangraha talks about it. It's a very huge body of knowledge. So anybody who is going through modern linguistics will also probably be able to appreciate some of these knowledge systems. When we say Arthapati, it is to do with postulation or some assumptions we make temporarily before in order to declare the truth. So one example I was giving, which is a Shastric example, is you see a person is growing healthy and they claim that they don't eat during the day. So you just assume that they have food in the night. Anupalati is in terms of knowing through the absence of something, right? So these are the various things that we looked at. We looked at some modern scientific references as well to understand some of this. And also in terms of Tramana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. See, these are frameworks that, even if you take a flashcard and start by-hearting some of these words, it's still a useful exercise, because you will encounter some of these, any kind of Indic, you can say a modern Indic text that is there. Probably if you take the Bhagavad Gita, or if you take, say, Ashtanga Hridayam or something, you may not encounter some of these. But if you take a text that talks about Indian knowledge systems, could be, say, Professor Mahadevan's book, or it could be, David Frawley's book, Vamadeva Shastriji's book on Hinduism. So this will have such frameworks mentioned. So even if you have a flashcard by-hearted, or draw a concept map, put it on the wall for your everyday viewing, it's not a bad idea. And in the Google Classroom, I've also shared a PDF which has the important terminologies of Sanatana Dharma and Indian knowledge systems. Even that will give you a good way to memorize and learn. So when we say Shravana Nididhyasana, it is like chewing the cud, right? So just like a cow, what it does, it eats the food and then it chews it. And after a while, it sort of brings it back from its gut and then again chews it before it is assimilated in the system. So this is a very similar process where, we listen to some knowledge, we reflect, and then there is a repeated reflection of that knowledge until it becomes integrated, such that the knowledge does not stick out as an external knowledge to us. It very much becomes, that's why people pay a lot of importance to embodied knowledge, where knowledge is not sticking out. It is not a chalk and talk or a paper and pencil knowledge. It is something that the person embodies. Right? So embodied knowledge is given a great importance in the tradition. And there is a traditional learning process that many Pathashalas and Gurukulams even now follow. It is in terms of the teaching, then Chintanam, and the Anuvadaha, which is the reproduction of knowledge. So the next day, the student actually repeats what has been taught the previous day. Right? And there are other aspects in terms of Adhyayana, Swadhyaya, debating, Upadesha, direct, and also the experiential learning process. Right? And we'll also look at Professor James Hartzell's research, in terms of how the learning Sanskritam or Matrubhasha or memorizing the content basically enhances the cognitive faculties in terms of the gray matter, white matter, the hippocampal region, ability to make better decisions. So one of the, I recently met a neuroscientist, and he was telling a neuron can hold 10,000 bits of information. That is like a neuron can hold say 10 sahasranamas, in fact. And if you put one neuron on top of the other, you would reach halfway up from the earth to the moon. You would reach halfway. So that is the amount of knowledge that the human brain is capable of compressing and storing. But then in the process of offering knowledge in bits and bytes, in fact, we have reduced knowledge to shorts and reels. So you can imagine how, what a great disservice we are doing to the neuronal capability and the plasticity of the human brain. And the neuroscientist was also mentioning how, this memorizing the content, one of the key features that differentiates a human brain versus the animal brain is in terms of hippocampal region, the frontal region, and we are capable of envisioning the future. We are capable of imagining the future or imagining something. That kalpana shakti or vikalpa is possible, right? And that is a very unique feature. And hence, when these regions of the brain develop because of visualization capabilities, because of the chanting process, because of the mantra japa, because of the yantra process, then what happens? The human brain actually gets a very is of a completely different quality. There is a book which is written called The Altered Traits. Okay, Altered Traits by Professor Richard Davidson. I think he is in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has developed a kindness curriculum which is taught in various schools that subscribe to his thought process. And he is, of course, a mindfulness expert. He is a disciple of Holiness Dalai Lama. And in this book, Altered Traits, he talks about how there are a lot of structural, functional, and trait changes that happen in the brain because of the process of mindfulness. So you can imagine when we talk about mindfulness, it's not just about, when we talk of mindfulness, it has a certain meaning. But if we look at the Ashtanga Yoga process in terms of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, it is a much deeper process, and you can see what it actually does to the human brain and human potential in general. So this there is a huge implication with respect to learning Indian knowledge systems on how we look at the world, how we process things, how our brain develops, and so many things. Again, there is a little bit of emphasis on memorization and how it is different from rote learning, which is sort of looked at as a bad thing in the current context. And there is also storytelling as a pedagogy. Even now you could see that there are a lot of traveling storytellers who go from one place to another talking about stories, and Katha tradition is still alive. There are so many people in the modern text Harikathas, at least in South India, Tamil Nadu, a handful of them who do Harikathas. Very, very powerful and very, very interlinked knowledge is offered through the Harikathas. And the best part is that it also catered to the rural audience. So if you go to a temple where Harikatha is happening, then you would see that a very rural population, a very, very localized population actually attending those Harikathas, and a lot of knowledge in terms of the value frameworks, the characters of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata are all imparted through that. So it would be very much ingrained in their thought process. And at this point, I remember when this tradition of this Mahabharata storytelling and the Draupadi Amman tradition in the northern part of Tamil Nadu. So there are regions in the northern part of Tamil Nadu, including Chennai and the Arcot districts and all that, where this Draupadi tradition is very, very strong. So what they do there is that in order to bring out the stories of the Mahabharata, there is an 18-day Katha event that happens in certain villages. And what happens in the villages is not just a form of storytelling, but in the form of enacting the various dramas, so that the population gets connected with the larger, the cultural ethos of the country. So what they do is that there are artists who come there who dress themselves as Draupadi. It's all male artists. They dress themselves as Draupadi. They dress themselves as Dushasana, Karna, Duryodhana, and all that. And the best part is that when the Draupadi Swayamvara happens, what they do is that there are 2, 3 villages. So one village says that I am on the side, or I am on the side of Arjuna or Pandavas, and one side says I am we belong to the family member of Draupadi. So they all bring the seer from both the villages. Seer is the things that are carried as part of the wedding. So the entire village, as if a real wedding of say Draupadi and Arjuna is happening, they take all the materials with them, and then the grand wedding happens. And it also happens in such a way that in this particular the Draupadi's vastraharan happens, and Dushasana has to pull the vastra of Draupadi. What he does is that in the morning, that he goes and he begs pardon at the feet of the local deity, saying that I am only enacting this particular thing. I have nothing against women, or I'm not committing a real crime. So please, Amma, forgive me. This is only a man who is dressed up as a woman, and I'm just acting that I'm pulling the sari. So please don't let the chapa of a woman not come to me. So that is the kind of value system that stories actually build. And then what happens is that there is also one of the Dashamahavidya forms of Devi, who comes there when Duryodhana dies. And then she, like Rudari, she goes around the entire village, crying with disheveled hair and broken bangles and all that, saying that our Raja Duryodhana has actually died. And then the entire village participates in burning the effigy of Duryodhana. So you can imagine the powerful narrative that such a thing brings, and what is impression in the chitta of chitta of the local population when such things are actually enacted in a very, very powerful way. So storytelling becomes a very effective pedagogy. Of course, we looked at the Panchatantra, Upanishads, and many such in the previous class. Of course, we saw 1 or 2 stories briefly. So before we go into today's class, I thought I will take a few moments of reflection from all of you in terms of, so far we've been looking at the history of education, the pedagogy, the theory of knowledge and all that. So what are some of the thoughts and reflections that you have, till whatever we looked at? Anything that you want to share at the moment in terms of the way, say, we have gone through education, the way our children are going through education, and what was happening in those times which made Bharat what it is. Just maybe the next 5-7 minutes, we can do that before we proceed to today's session. It's just an open discussion. No specific. Yes.
Yeah, I think after going through the traditional value system of how the education was imbibed and overall gained in terms of a value system, that part is missing when I send my kids to the school. Like, they spend 8 hours in the school, and I don't have an understanding how much values they are getting, how much is the true knowledge in terms of gaining the unity in terms of knowledge, in terms of gaining wisdom, as well as how you can apply that knowledge in your day-to-day life, and as well as how you can think about that knowledge as a divine source itself. That connection is missing. It's as if a trade is going on. We are giving you this knowledge because you're coming to the school, and now you go back, and the piece is missing where you are thinking more about sustainability and in making the kids more mature and more wisdom oriented, to help them understand that this is something now you need to pass on further ahead. That link is not there.
Wonderfully put. Anandji has.
Yeah, Bhagini, I just wanted to add one point related to what you mentioned about memorization, right? Rote memorization. Actually, my daughter, maybe a few months ago, she asked me a question. How do I decide which things to memorize, which things to not memorize? And the short answer I gave her was that you have to look into the effort that has been put into each word. So the information density, for example, you take any small sloka, um, it is maybe it has let us say it is usually, let us say, composed of 32 different syllables, but it has a lot of information density compared with, let us say, a modern book like, let's say, Harry Potter. There the 16 words basically don't mean anything. It doesn't have information density. So one way to kind of, because people today, kids also, adults also, we have to look at both kinds of information. One's with packed information, one with, like one that is not supposed to be memorized. So a simple rule of thumb is to see the information density, and a simple sloga like, let's say, Vakratunda Mahakaya, just even though it is small, it still has a lot of information. To explain it to somebody, it will take 5-10 minutes. Whereas a similar sentence from Harry Potter does not have the information density. So the amount of work put in per word by the author to that is a good metric. And if the information density is high, then it is worth memorizing it. If the information density is low, then there is no point memorizing it. So that's one way to kind of look at when to memorize, when not to memorize.
Wonderful. Yeah, very beautifully. In fact, the Sutra model of pedagogy is something that we can write about. Not many papers or research has been done on that. And this aspect of how much density is packed into density of information that is packed is definitely an important factor of this model of learning.
Yeah, correct, Bhagni. And I think when I was younger, for example, I did not really like this kind of thing. So, but when you memorize and then try to understand, the impact is at a different level. So that is not something that you will know unless you have experienced it yourself.
Okay, thank you. Akshay ji?
So I have a 6-year-old kid, and if I want to kind of, put him on the path where he kind of tries to memorize more and helps with his brain, like, what do you guys recommend, like how we should start him with respect to like other shloks or suktams? Like, what are the starting points for him that, we can prep him for?
Definitely, Ji. Some of the stotrams and shlokas can be memorized. In fact, in a very Sanskrit learning, in Sanskrit pedagogy, people start memorizing the Amarakosha, in fact, at a very young age, which is basically the thesaurus of Sanskritam. But you can definitely start with first, maybe the Shanti mantras that we usually chant here now as part of this, and then the Guru Stotram, which is there, Guru Brahma, Vishnu, and then the entire set of verses. So, like because it builds on a lot of verbal intelligence, then it also brings the entire spectrum of pronunciations is brought forth. For example, I was reading a research where, depending on the food that we eat and depending on the place that we live and all that, the population develops a certain dental structure and the tongue structure and all that, because of which certain cultures cannot pronounce certain words. For example, I was talking to a person from Israel, and that person had difficulty in pronouncing a word which had r in the first. So if the word is Rahul, person was saying Ahul, but the r wouldn't come. But if it is somewhere in between, they were still managing to somehow say that, right? So it means that in the Sanskrit or Hindi or whatever has a full spectrum of pronunciations, which is an advantage for us, which we should probably make use of. So definitely start with some of the stotrams.
Okay, Rudrasen ji?
Yeah, been reflecting on the whole pramata, pramana, and prameya dimension of understanding that when we ask, like, why should I bother? Why do it? Why is someone telling me? How can you prove anything? That that whole dimension of understanding is not just gathering knowledge like we do with textbooks, because it eliminates the pramata and the pramana. They're objectifying it and dumbing it down, which is what all modern schools do. And in these things, including the embodied, Matashriji, you mentioned an embodied learning, it's that completely three dimensions of growth that is happening. That is mind blowing, and all of this is built on that. That has been my chintan for last week. And I think Mukunji had a blog post he posted, which I was reading and reflecting on. And it's really fantastic that all of this is based on, it's like these three dimensions that are growing in you. So the srotras and all are just, do this, do that, that's fine. But every aspect of that is growing. It's like a 3D thing that is happening, not just some flat piece of paper that you're memorizing. And that is a really stunning insight. And I feel people need to understand that why we do this is because of all these dimensions. It's you who is transforming, the method is transforming, and the knowledge is like the body of knowledge is growing. So that was really amazing. I was trying to convince of someone, talking to someone like, what is this understanding? Well, it's just all these three dimensions of understanding that you bring in.
Very nice.
Wonderfully put. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
when we by heart the stotras, it is not just the stotras that we know. At the end of the day, it's also the neuronal structures that are forming and so many more things that are happening.
Ashwinji?
Yeah. So one thing I wanted, one thing which I had, which I was, which provoked my interest was the anupalabdhi source of knowledge. Like for anupalabdhi, it means there is something is missing, and from that there is a deduction which is made, and for that the classification, we understand why why things were classified, like why the sage Vyasa classified the Vedas into four collections or samhitas, and to once you categorize things or classify, and the knowledge uh, can be sustained for the longer time, because a missing information could be deducted. And there is a classic example like Dmitry Mendeleev. He classified what all the elements that time into a table and predicted that some missing elements are there. So there could be discovered in future, and which they later got discovered, and he created that these are properties of those elements which will discover in future. So categorizing like Sage Vyasa did, or 108 Upanishads. So we deduce that with Anupalabdhi that there will be these missing knowledge sources, and they will have those properties. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Thank you. DCG?
Yeah, namaste. Actually, when I took a college course way back when, I took a Hindu philosophy class. In it was in my paper. I wrote like, okay, I learned all this stuff. My mom taught me. I read the books, but I had no idea what it meant. But I still said it. But now I'm understanding it's all by design, because the root of why we learn and how we learn is not understood. And I still complain to my mom, like, how come you don't know the meaning? And why didn't you start with the meaning, and then by on the side you have to tell me what exactly this is. Like, you can't just say it's a Surya mantra and just do it. Or look at Dakshinamurti, and then even the calendars, they will put the mantra, they have no meaning in it. Till now, I mean, I see everywhere there's no meaning mentioned anywhere, right? So because it's hard to transliterate. That's one thing in other languages. I'm understanding more so now, and it's all by design. So that is the hardest thing for me to understand, is like, okay, you have to go seek the knowledge It's not given to you. And that's what it's only for the seekers. Like even in the Bible, they say like, "Oh, you're a seeker," you know. Um, I guess that's the biggest thing that I'm coming to understand, that it is what it is. Only if you want to go get it, it's there. The universe is for you, but you have to go make that attempt and try in every way possible to get it. Otherwise, it's not for you. Try again next time.
Nice. Thank you, Ji. Dinesh Ji, namaste.
नमस्ते नमस्ते अनंत लक्ष्मी मातृश्री। पहले तो इस सभी ने बताया, कुछ समझ में नहीं आया, थोड़ा थोड़ा ही आया। एकदम हाई लेवल के वर्ड्स सभी यूज हो रहे थे, लेकिन ऐसा लगता है कि जो अभी मातृश्री ने बताया कि जो हमारा ऋषि प्रमाण वाक्य है, उसको जो भी प्रोसेस से हुआ फिर उसको कहते हैं ऋषि का प्रमाण है। तो ऐसे ही जो थोड़ा बहुत हम लोग तो कन्विंस है ही है कि हमारा जो नॉलेज सिस्टम है, हमारी जो ऋषि परंपरा है, ज्ञान की परंपरा है, वो दुनिया में सबसे बढ़िया है। अभी हम लोग उसके ऊपर कुछ ना कुछ हमारे दिमाग का कूड़ा निकाल कर उसके अंदर क्वेश्चन डाउट्स क्रिएट करते रहते हैं। वो भी कोई बात नहीं है। वो सायणाचार्य जी ने भी बताया कि प्रश्न करो, और जब तक अपने आप से कन्विंस ना हो तब तक करते रहो, लेकिन साथ में ये भी सोचे कि ये सही में जरूरी है या नहीं है। लेकिन दूसरी बात कि ये हम सभी इधर इकट्ठा हुए हैं, कुछ हम ये नॉलेज सिस्टम के बारे में सोच रहे, हमारे लिए और आने वाली पीढ़ी के लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं। तो ऐसा लगता है कि ये तो हम तो काइंड ऑफ कन्विंस है कि भी हमारा ही सबसे बढ़िया है, और हम क्या आगे कर सकते हैं। तो क्विक इस डायरेक्शन में आगे बढ़ सके, ताकि बच्चों के लिए अनुसंधान में जो भी क्वेश्चंस है कि ये स्कूल में क्या चल रहा है इधर, वो हम सबको मोर और लेस मालूम ही है कि स्कूल में क्या पढ़ा रहे, और वो तो इनको हमको तो कैपिटलाइज्ड कमोडिटी बनाने का ही एक जरिया है। और बाहर से ऐसा दिखाएंगे कि वो आपको तो ये सीख रहे वो सीख रहे, लेकिन इंटरनल जो माइंड है वो कैपिटलाइज कमोडिटी हमारे बच्चों को बनाने का ये पूरा सिस्टम है इधर का, मोर और लेस। तो हम इससे निकल कर क्या कर सकते हैं, कुछ आप उसके बारे में जब भी लगे तो प्लीज। धन्यवाद।
Very, very nice, Dinesh Ji. Thank you so much. So I think, Dinesh Ji is basically talking about the innovations that we can bring based on our approach to the schooling system that kind of dumbifies and commoditizes everyone's intellect and brain. So yeah, definitely something that we look forward to as part of our initiative here, as well as upcoming research opportunities. So wonderful. Prasad Ji?
Namaste Ji. Namaste everyone. First of all, thanks again for giving this opportunity. We are learning from the last 4 weeks. We are able to learn, and there is a lot of information was being shared. I want to share one experience where I have last year we put our kids in learning the Bhagavad Gita program from the SGS, Ganapati Sachidananda. They're doing this. He was participate memorizing the whole Bhagavad Gita. And he was complaining every day, like, why I need to memorize, like, my friends are playing all these games and I want to do karate or want to do these all things. But we insist him, like, this will be helpful, like, just continue doing what you're doing. The point he made is like, okay, I memorize these, like, the whole 400 700 slokas. So I know the bits of meaning of here and there, but now he was trying to understand the essence, like some meanings he's trying to find it out from different books. From ISKCON Temple, they have written some of those, released some of those books. He's trying to understand the meaning, or they are trying to map these meaning with the story. So he's trying to read those things, understanding it. So coming to the point, one day he asked me, why do I need to memorize the tables rather than I have a simple calculator which I can use and get the things done, right? It was a valid point, so I just asked them, you have memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita. There is something without reading the book, you memorized it, right? So the way you done it is, you can perform this one in front of everyone, so if I ask you, tell me about word karma in any of the slokas, he was able to get all the slokas which are starting with karma or jnana, and he can able to do a parallel chanting as well, one kid, he was telling some Arjuna Uvacha, and and these guys also from a different phase, and they both will able to do parallel chanting of different chapters without this. So these all things feel so good when they do it. But as other people shared, right, memorizing the slokas, important of Sanskrit, this plays a key role in their development. One suggestion is start early, that's where there is a saying in our Telugu thing, when the plant is small, right, then only you can able to bend them, when they are growing big, they will not listen to you. So whatever you want to do it, to start the seeds early. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, very nice, Ji. Very nice. Okay, last question, Mukunji.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a reflection here, right? I think one of the things, I mean, similar experience like Prasad Di, my grandfather taught me, the entire Taittiriya Upanishad by heart when I was 7. I didn't know, I was learning these things, and I think the meaning started dawning upon me as I aged. And I think the importance is, at that age, from a neurological perspective, there is no limit to what is the capacity of the memory, or what is the capacity of the buddhi, or the the manas, for that matter. Right? So at that age, you're just the kids that learn these chanting, you're setting a very high bar in terms of your limits of memory. But anyways, the reflection I had was in terms of the entire knowledge and the learning process, right? Many times we think, whether it's our rituals or traditions or things that we do, it's just something that we do for religious purposes, but it's all by design. It's all a system of knowledge, right? So I think that is something that has matured, and I've had my own sort of understanding as everything that we do as part of our Hindu culture. There is an aspect of education and knowledge associated with it.
Very nice. Excellent. Thank you, Mukunji. Dinesh ji?
Sorry, one very quick.
Yeah, of course.
सिर्फ वैसे ही नेक्स्ट टाइम जब हमारा क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन हो, स्मृति जी तो हिंदी समझती है, और बहुत सारे लोग भी हिंदी बोल भी सकते हैं, तो जो कोई भी बोल सकते हैं वो कुछ हिंदी में बोले तो थोड़ा मुझे ज्यादा वो रहेगा. इंग्लिश बोले तो चलेगा, लेकिन अगर हिंदी बोल सकते हैं तो प्लीज बोलिए. स्मृति जी तो नहीं बोल सकती, कम बोल सकती है, तो आप यहाँ रहने वाले तो कोई लोग बोल सकते हैं अच्छे से, तो प्लीज जब हमारा डिस्कशन हो उस टाइम.
Sure. We'll mix Hindi and English, and then for your benefit, for sure.
Okay.
धन्यवाद.
So we'll go to today's presentation. Today, I thought I will bring a little bit from Ayurveda and also bring out various masters, what they have spoken on education. So there is this chapter called the Vimanasthana of Charaka Samhita. So the Charaka Samhita can be, the entire Charaka Samhita is available as a big page, the translations. Some of the Sanskritam verses are there, but large has to do with the English translation. So you can have a look at it at a later stage. And there Charaka talks in the Charaka Samhita, it is mentioned the various aspects of Ayurvedic pedagogy. So it is a text where the pedagogical aspects are built into the text as to how to teach Ayurveda, how to bring the best in a Ayurveda Vidyarthi, and how an Ayurveda Vidyarthi can become a good Vaidya. All these things are mentioned. And so here you have the Adhyayana and the Adhyapana aspects. Adhyayana is to do with the study, and the Adhyapana is to do with the teaching process. So the learning and teaching in Ayurveda both are mentioned in the Vimanasthana of the Charaka Samhita. And so here, if you look at the Vimanasthana, this particular chapter in the Vimanasthana, it is mentioned like how do you select a particular text for your study of Ayurveda? Or in fact, how do you select a text? So those principles are eye-opening, because in general itself you can apply it to how do you select a particular text, right? You know, for example, you want to learn about quantum physics. What book would you learn from? You want to learn about neuroscience. What book will you learn from? So like that, how do you select a particular text? So those guidelines are given in this chapter. And what are the various qualities of an aspiring Ayurveda student who wants to become Ayurveda Vaidya? What are the qualities of a teacher? What are the various methods of learning and teaching? And in fact, what is also mentioned is that what are the various types of seminars and symposiums that you can conduct, and what would be the various types of attendees who come there, and how to deal with them. So it is not just about having that. Of course, I won't be going into that in this particular session, but I welcome you. I will share the link in Google Classroom. So there it is mentioned like, okay, now that you have learned and you go to a seminar and present it, you will have different kinds of audience. You will have audience that are friendly with you. You will have naive audience in terms of that they don't have prior knowledge. You will have a learned audience. You will also have a hostile audience. So how do you present your knowledge in such a way that you have a comfortable situation when you are presenting? So it also brings out in terms of how do you refute the arguments and put down a hostile, an audience. Like if they are asking questions, or if they are asking, if they are tending to argue, or they stand up and then refute and say that what you're presenting is bullshit and all that, right? So then there is a particular way in which you can counter these arguments, and that entire process is given as part of this chapter. Of course, I wouldn't be going into that. So what are some of the guidelines? This is just a long list I'm just going to talk about, but the idea is for this session is to tell you that all this is there as part of Charaka Samhita, right? And how do you select a particular text? So it should be comprehensive enough, and again, it is peer reviewed and then followed by a lot of people, and of course successful practitioners as well. And it is capable of dealing with a moderate learner, a good learner, and also a learner who's still gaining knowledge. And it should be written by a person who has experiential knowledge. It's not just for writing the textbook sake, but who has experienced it. So basically from the Rishis, right? And it should have an informative title, a firm base, free from weak and difficult words. So you can imagine that in a very ancient time itself, they spoken about how a text should be structured, right? And with proper sequencing of its content, and where there is clear meanings that are given, appropriate verses are given, and also it focuses on particular structure without going here and there, beating around the bush. So it should be very, very precise. Knowledge should be presented, and it should provide a good understanding of the topics. And there should be, it should be effective. It should be understandable. It should have definitions with a lot of examples, so that the student of Ayurveda gains a lot of knowledge by going to this particular text. So even when textbooks are written, say Ashtanga or any other text is written, these guidelines would be followed by the authors, who themselves are Vaidyas, who would have brought this knowledge for the benefit of others, right? And what are some of the qualities as mentioned in Charaka Samhita? is in terms of having clear knowledge of the subject and of course practical experience. Again, this all might sound very simple. Okay, yeah, I know this kind of, but the thing is that everything has been codified as part of the knowledge system. So that is what I want to bring out here. Because whenever we talk about Indian knowledge system, pedagogy and all that, we wonder where is it all spoken about. So I'm just giving you some samples of where this is actually written about. And the teacher is well equipped, possessing all the senses in normal condition. Of course, because anyway, a Vaidya needs all senses intact, and well versed in managing emergency situations, is very quick to act, and is free from ego, is free from envy, anger, and so many more negative qualities, especially the Shad Ripus, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, and all that, and treats the disciples appropriately, and also has a characteristics of a good teacher and fit to imbue the understanding. So basically, has to be very clear in one's delivery, also has to be skilled by hand, because a lot of things have to be demonstrated to the students, whether it is preparing of the kashayams or demonstrating a surgery, whatever it is. The physically they should be very skilled, and emotionally they should be strong and balanced, and cognitively they should be very robust in order to impart that particular knowledge. And these qualities are mentioned as sutra. So you just memorize the sutra, you'll know what are the qualities of the teacher. And what are the means of learning? So the student who's desirous of learning finds out an ideal preceptor and should sincerely follow the preceptor, like worshipping fire, God, king, father, God. And after satisfactorily gaining the knowledge, students should always continuously attempt to improve the knowledge which has been gained and go into the depths of the hidden meanings of the various sutras, the scientific explanations, and express it impressively with comprehensions of ideas, power of speaking. So that is where they talk about how the students should present and in what kind of audience, what kind of seminars can be conducted, and how to counter certain arguments, and how to put down the hostile audience, and how to be very humble when the entire audience is very learned. So you will also have audiences which are very learned, right? For example, you are defending your thesis. Of course, there will be co-students who are there who are still exploring, but there will also be the committee members who are knowledgeable. So at all times, you have to be very humble. But then if there are like 3 people who just get up and then say that what you're presenting is incorrect, then you need to have a way of winning that particular argument so that the thesis will you will pass the Viva OC, right? So it means that there should be an appropriate way of presenting, and it's not just about learning the text, but also doing a reflection on the deep meanings of whatever is mentioned in that particular text. And so how the Desha, Kala, all that also has been given, and how does one sit for studying, right? So one who is desirous of studying comes with a calm mind, and at an appropriate time should get up early in the morning, and after clearing all the bowels and all that, should do the appropriate rituals in order to clean the place, and also the worshipping the various aspects like the devatas, the cow, the brahmins, the teacher, elders, and all that. Then sitting comfortably on the clean ground and present the various sutras that have been learned, and then invite the knowledge that the teacher is going to teach in that particular session. And he or she should think about the meaning and principle to get rid of his own defects and to know others' defects. So he should proceed the study without wasting time in the midday, afternoon, and night. So this is the method of the study. So what happens? The morning is basically dedicated to various, shaucha, and also paying our obeisance to the various devatas. The yajnas are done, and learning happens. There is a question in terms of where Charaka and Patanjali are the same. There are some historical records that talk about that they are same, but there are also theories that say that they were different. There is also a theory that says Charaka means Chara means a moving person, so it could as well be a moving Vaidya. Like Charaka need not have been that person as such. There are different theories about this. Because even when we look at the invocation for Patanjali, we say Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena. So in order to remove the impurities of the body, there are some aushadis and Vaidyam that is done. So he was a master Vaidya as well. So that's why people attribute that he was probably qualities of learning. Qualities of a student. There are, again, as I told you, could look very common, cliched or whatever, but again, since it is codified in the books I'm presenting. And here, in terms of, there should be no fault of the indriyas, because a Vaidya, with a very, very gentle touch also, should be able to perceive the nadis or the flow of prana. So then it means that the senses should be very clear. So there are some Vaidyas, I have seen who take up Mauna before they do Nadi Pariksha and all that, because talking wastes a lot of energy. And, I also have heard of Vaidyas who, based on the time in which the disease is reported, they are able to decode whether the patient will survive or come out of disease or whatever it is. So a mix of astrology, mix of astronomy and the subtler sciences together with Ayurveda, everything is, so the instrument should be very, very subtle and should perceive things which are beyond the outward senses, right? And so if the advantage is, if you're born in the family of physicians, it means from childhood you are trained, or at least you should be aware of the conduct and behavior of the various physicians, and should be very desirous of gaining scientific knowledge, should not have any addictions, should not get angry, should be endowed with modesty, purity, good conduct, affection, dexterity, sincerity, should be interested in study, and should not have greed or idleness, empathetic to all creatures, following all the instructions of the teacher and being attached to this teacher. So in fact, when we talk about this to our own children, young people, we can create stories around each of these qualities. Then it becomes a comprehensive way to inculcate these qualities. So if you just put up a list in your room, child is going to say, I already know all of these. But then we also need a context for the student to imbibe and cultivate these qualities. So bringing out stories, bringing out activities in order to illustrate these values that can be experimented. So in this context, when we talk about the qualities of a student, though it is not in the Charaka Samhita, this is, I'm taking insights from Vedanta. Okay, so in Vedanta, which is again a philosophical system, one of the Shad Darshanas, especially in Advaita Vedanta, it talks about sadhana chatushtaya. So what are the fourfold qualities that a student of Vedanta should have? So the fourfold qualities include Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti and Mumukshutva. Okay. Viveka is in terms of the capacity to differentiate which is permanent, which is impermanent, which is dharma, which is adharma, and which is beneficial, which is not beneficial. So when a person has, the student has to cultivate this quality of understanding which is permanent and which is temporary. So basically, when we look at the scriptures, it talks about Brahman or the Paramatma as, or the that one being the ultimate, or it being the permanent thing. So until realizing that that is the permanent thing, and everything else is transient, whether it's the body or the mind or the various instruments, they are all very transient in nature. The Paramatman is the ultimate permanent. That developing that quality is Vivek. Vairagya is in terms of developing a certain detachment from worldly pleasures, because you are a student who has now dedicated your time to learn Vedanta. So now there is no question of having all those distractions, right? It's like a deep preparation. You could have been before becoming a student of Vedanta, you could have been okay just being distracted with other things. But now that you have taken up this commitment, and it requires a certain vairagya, so that is also listed as one of the qualities. There are again 6 qualities: Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadha. Shama is in terms of the calmness of the mind. Dama is in terms of control or mastery, Indriya Nigraha. Okay, Shama is Mano Nigraha, and Dama is Indriya Nigraha. And Uparama or Uparati is non-essential activities, Swadharmanishtanam eva. So being established in one's own Swadharma and not getting distracted by other things, because you are now a student of Vedanta. Diksha is in terms of forbearance or endurance of the various dvandvas, Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukha, and all that. You endure the spectrum of changes or spectrum or the binaries or the dvandvas of life, right? So there will be situations which you are, which is comfortable for you. There will be situations which are not comfortable for you. So then this will really help. Developing the titiksha will help, and not getting used to all the comforts. When we look at, say, Rama or Krishna, they belong to the royal families, but then they grew up in they learned the acharyas, leading a very simple life in the Gurukula, in the ashrama, right? So at that, during the period of study, they were not exposed to all the comforts. So, but just contrast this with the students today, right? Typically what happens, here, I don't know about there, back in Bharat, now students are, inside an environment like a home, and they come out of the home and immediately board the bus to go to school, which is again an internal environment. Then they reach the school again, which is basically the what do you say? It is an inside environment. So there is no exposure to the elements for the student. So then what happens? The child is pampered. The body of the child is pampered only to those kinds of temperatures. And the moment the child plays even for an hour in the sun, then they start complaining, I have a headache, I have a fever, I don't feel well, and all that. Right? So then what happens? There is no titiksha that is developed. So exposing the child or the student to different conditions is very important. So, for example, now the Kumbh Mela is going on. So Anami Foundation has a Kendra in the Kumbh Mela. And we have been there since January 10. And every day we have been doing Annadanam. And Guru Kripa, till date, we have done more than 60 to 70,000 people. We have done Annadanam for, and we have a bunch of volunteers who are cooking there. And my younger son, who is 11 years of age, even before we got the Kumbh Kendra and all that, he already reserved, saying that all the 45 days, I want to be in the Kumbh Mela with, that is Shrimanji. I want to be with my father. I want to go to the Kumbh Mela. So we all agreed, and now since January 10th, he's there in the Kumbh Mela. He will be until Shivaratri. So I called up in between and asked him, what do you do on a daily basis? He said, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I go take bath in the cold waters of the Ganga, wash my clothes, and then I come back, I do some yoga, and then I'm just playing here and there. I roam around, play, and then I chant a little bit of Bhagavad Gita. Then I have my food, and then I do Annadana or whatever. That whatever routine is being followed in the Kumbh Kendra, my 11-year-old child is following that routine. So imagine the amount of titiksha the body develops. So here back, there is a certain temperature, there is a certain access. In ashram is already a simple environment, but when you take it to Prayagraj, it becomes very simplified. So what happens to the body, the mind of such a child is that they develop a lot of robustness. So introducing some seva component in the child's life, introducing some challenges like this, maybe a weekend height, right? Or giving them some titiksha based things, like for example eating bitter gourd, vegetable on a Sunday, right? Probably if they don't like it, making them eat that, right? Simple things will actually expand their scope of experience. This will become very important. And translated to a student of Vedanta, it's a completely different level of titiksha that they develop. Shraddha is in terms of the Guru Vedanta Vakyadishu Vishwasaha Shraddha. So having faith in whatever the Guru and the scriptures say is the Shraddha. And Samadhana is Chitta Ekagrata. It is the Ekagrata Chitta, having single pointed focus, and the Chitta is in Samadhana state without any Chanchala. And Mumukshutva is that intense Moksho me bhuyat iti ittha. I want moksha, I want nothing else but moksha. Having this deep desire is an indication of a very ardent student of Vedanta. So all the Vedantic text will probably talk about this sadhana chatushtaya, which is Viveka Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, and Moksha. And coming back to the Ayurvedic text, what are the various means of knowledge? So you have Karana, Karana, Karya Yoni, Karya, Karya Phala, Anubandha, Deshakala, Pravritti, and Upaya. This is a framework that's been described in Charaka Samhita. Okay. So what is Karana? It is the cause. What is the Karana? It is the, when you write in English, the spelling will be the same for both of them. But Karana means it is the instrument. Karya Yoni, which is the source. Yoni means source. It is the source of action. Karya is the action. Karya Phala, it is the fruit of the action. Anubandha, it is the consequence of the action, right? Or Karya Phala Anubandha, both it's the expected outcome and consequence of the action. Desha, it is the place where the action is taking place. Kala, the time when it is happening. And Pravritti, it is in terms of the effort that is required to perform the action. And Upaya is in terms of effective management of that particular action. So a student has to have knowledge of all these dimensions in order to be very effective in whatever they do. The Vaidya also should have knowledge of all these dimensions in order to be a very effective Vaidya. So physician is like acts like a doer, and the drug or the medicine that is given acts like a karana. Imbalance of the dhatus basically is the cause of the disease, so that is called karya yoni. And the balance of the dhatus is what the karya action that has to be done. Attainment of good health is what the karya phala, that is the outcome that is achieved. Anubandha is in terms of the lifespan. The consequence of that is an increased lifespan. And the desha is where the patient is the desha, because on the patient's body is where it is being administered. And year, the kala is in terms of which period of year it is administered, and which phase of the disease it is administered. And the initiation of the therapy, right? That is the pravritti in terms of what is the effort that is put in the therapy. And the excellence and overall effectiveness of the treatment is called the upaya. So this is a framework that is again, taught and learned as part of. Again, when we talk about the student, and Chanakya also has some guidelines. He says that if you have to be a true seeker of knowledge, then you must avoid the following 8 activities in terms of pleasures, temptations, the taste that satisfy the tongue, anger and greed, in fact, personal beautification, right? And too much entertainment, excessive sleeping, and extreme indulgence. In fact, I was reading a text where they were speaking not to use, perfumes. A student is discouraged from using perfumes. So basically, it's a very simple lifestyle that the student has to follow. Since we are talking about IKS pedagogy, that's why I'm bringing all these aspects. And if you are not able to follow this, he says you have to drop from the study. And at the same time, if anyone wants to study sincerely, then he should stop craving for comfort. So one can never indulge in comfort and education both at the same time. But what we talk about education today is a huge contrast. I don't know about the US, but back in India, people talk about air-conditioned classrooms, air-conditioned buses, the best of the shoes. In fact, it is very clearly mentioned in one of the texts, I think it was Manusmriti or could be Charaka Samhita, that a student should not wear sandals or shoes. Basically, they should walk barefoot. Some of these will look very extreme given the modern context, but then it also brings out the overall philosophy is that the student should not be having to go through, what do you say, a very luxurious life. And this famous statement or a verse by Chanakya, it says, "Alayet panchavarshani, dashavarshani tadayet, praptetu shodashe varshe putram mitravadacharet." Okay, so here he says, "Lalayet panchavarshani." So until 5 years, the kid should be pampered or cuddled. That, in fact, tadayet, of course, we can translate it here at least for now to be just be strict with the child for the next 10 years. And then, but once the child turns 16, he or she should be treated as a friend. So these are some guidelines that are available as part of various texts the Manusmriti talks. Sometimes what happens is, there's something called presentism. Presentism means trying to understand an ancient framework given the present thought process. So some of it will look very, strange or outdated, or like, how can I do this? Think about this now. But then, according to the Kala and Desha, we can always adapt some of these, and underlying tattva has to be understood. What is the idea behind speaking some of this? So, in the next few slides, I thought I will bring out what are certain modern contributions to education. When I say modern, it's in terms of various masters who have spoken about education. So, of course, I'm sure many of you might have read some of J. Krishnamurti's works, and very, very different kind of a thought process he brought. There are a lot of schools that run based on J. Krishnamurti's thought process. So here he says that the right kind of education while encouraging the learning of a technique. So here in this particular essay, he talks about of course, there is a use for learning a particular technique because it gives you a lot of confidence. It gives you job opportunities, like, for example, engineering or the technique of repairing something, right? So you become confident with that particular object. Then if you just stop there, then it can do a lot of harm. So he says, what is the right kind of education? So it should accomplish something which is of far greater importance. It should help man to experience the integrated process of life. Just as we look, avibhaktanam vibhakteshu. So whatever, even if it is separate, we should be able to see the interconnectedness of various things, right? And it is this experiencing that will put capacity and technique in the right place. If one really has something to say, the very saying of it creates its own style, but learning a style without inward experience can only lead to superficiality. So that is why the pratyaksha prana becomes that anubhava becomes an important aspect of the education process. In the modern or contemporary education, what happens? Of course, now things are changing a bit. But for a long time, we don't have the process of experimentation. We just study from the books, solve a few problems, but the real world exposure is not even until a later stage. So this can lead to a lot of superficiality and purity of knowledge base, which makes the learner very not so confident about what they have. And education in the true sense is helping the individual to be mature and free, to flower greatly in love and goodness. That is what we should be interested in, and not in shaping the child according to some idealistic form. Of course, all of us will have views that are different from each of these people, but just to bring out the pluralistic nature of how we have looked at education since time immemorial in Bharat, and it has been a continuous process. It's not, though there have been invasions and colonization and all that, there has been somebody who has always held it sacred and passed it down from one generation to another. Of course, we've had Shri Aurobindo and Mother, who about integral education. When we read about the integral education, it resonates very much with the framework of the Panchakotra. So as part of our program, we will be going through the Panchakosha framework. At that time, we will also bring some parallels with the integral education. So Sri Aurobindo and the mother adopted a lot of frameworks, words in the English language because they are addressing a particular audience. We do see there is a lot of similarity there. So Sri Aurobindo says the true basis of education is the study of the human mind, infant, adolescent, and adult, and any system of education founded on the theories of academic perfection, which ignores this particular instrument of study, is more likely to hamper and impair intellectual growth than to produce a perfect and perfectly equipped being. Right? So that is why even if you look at Patanjali Maharishi, he talks about yogas chitta vritti nirodha tadadarshtu swarupeva sthanam vritti sarupya vrittayah panchataya klishta klishtaha. So he talks about what are the various vrittis the mind generates. So even before going into the knowledge or sadhana to be followed, Patanjali Maharishi decodes the human mind to a great extent and what are the various states that the mind goes through, and then he brings out techniques in order to tackle the mind, right? So developing an understanding of this instrument, whether it is the manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, it has to be done appropriately so that then the content, when it is given, it is much more effective. All our shastras decode the mind to a very, very deep extent. Right? And for the educationist has to do not with dead, not deal with dead material like the artist or sculptor, but with an infinite, subtle, and sensitive organism, which is the child or the learner. He cannot shape an educational masterpiece of the out of human or stone. He has to work in the elusive substance of the mind and respect limits imposed by the fragile human. So basically, as a teacher, we have to understand the chitta of the learner and also that the instrument upadhi or the limiting instrument in terms of the body before we impart any kind of education. Again, yes, Rohitji?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you explain a little bit more about how this is applicable to the kids as well, like small kids? Like, for example, it is talking about the true basis of education is understanding of the human mind, infant and adolescent. Can you translate how that will help in terms of kids as well to approach the education system?
So basically, as a teacher, suppose, for example, in fact, if you look at the way the textbooks are written, I don't know about there, but at least here I can say some of the texts that are prevalent in schools are mostly not written by people who have direct experience teaching the children. So what happens is that the teacher who teaches picks up a book. Could be Pearson, could be Cambridge, or could be NCERT or whatever, and then directly starts to bombard the child with all the bits and bytes of information that is provided in the book. So, but then the teacher does not largely understand the nature of the human mind. Though as part of B.Ed curriculum and all that, they go through some amount of child psychology, child development and all that. But again, when it comes to the classroom, the one-way bombardment of information happens. So then understanding child psychology, child development from different frameworks also becomes important as is being mentioned here when we translate it to the current context.
Got it. Thank you.
Rudra Senji? Akshay ji, what is the question? Sorry, I'm not able to see.
I wanted to say, like you said in the beginning, the foundation, which is the pramata, the pramana and pramita. All the education system is doing, they are just bombarding you because there's a complete disregard to the learner, that is the child or the mind, right? That entire dimension is gone. It's like making it so dumb. And this is why it's important, right? All these statements are roundabout ways to say that thing that was said, you mentioned at the very beginning. consider these dimensions. And from that comes the right way of learning, and which is why all the current system is failing. So I think just tying that point to what you said, that this is why it's important that we understand that aspect, that the most important aspect of the knower, which is disregarded by Western systems.
Correct. 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 Very true. Yes, I see an A raising the hand, but I'm not able to see the name. Shrikantji, can you help?
Yeah, so we have two people.
Anuji.
Anuji and Mukunji. So Anuji.
So in reference to the earlier question, even in the modern context, I teach in the school, so they also advocate a philosophy of differentiated teaching. So we have to get down to the level of the child, even though the content is the same, we have to modify when we are teaching the child, depending on how much the child can absorb and understand, and also their other setting limitations, like from what kind of family she comes, if she has any physical issues. So we have to take all those into consideration and do the differentiated teaching. I just wanted to
Yes.
share that. Thank you.
Now a lot of changes, actually, innovative pedagogies have come, as you say, to factor in many of these dimensions. Mukunji?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that, I think in the modern world, we are just feeding the external information as a way of knowledge. And I think in our Indic approach, it's more of understanding the instrument of experience also. I think as an instrument that we have, our, whether that is our Jnanendriyas or Karmendriyas, I think Indic education also helps you understand the instrument using which you're going to be learning the knowledge. So I think that makes it more holistic.
Very true, Ji. And in the modern context, in the name of teacher training or the whatever training process, there is a lot of emphasis on the process and not on the person who's actually imparting that knowledge or imbibing that knowledge, for that matter. So it is like like an AI, like a building a machine, irrespective of this this chitta and karanas. Still the process will go on, kind of. It is trying to remove that person from the entire picture. Then Shri Aurobindo further adds that the first principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. Of course, there can be different views on these, and the teacher is looked at as a facilitator. The second principle is that the mind has to be consulted in its own way. So the idea of hammering the child into the shape desired by the parent is a barbarous and ignorant superstition. Very strong words there. The third principle of education is to work from near to the far. This is a beautiful thing, like basically presenting the localized context first, and then taking the child from there to an alien context. One thing that I see here is that back in India, just now we are talking about Indian knowledge systems being introduced in the schools there. But now what we are going through here in India is that a very, very Americanized context with respect to the textbooks. So for you, the localized context, but for children here studying in India, they have no view or they have no personal experience of many of the things that they study in the textbook, whether it is the names of the people or the objects or the various connotations and phrases that they use and all that. So what happens, a lot of alien content is actually bombarded into the child's mind, which they don't have. So the pratyaksha knowledge takes a long time to actually flower. So we must not take up the nature by the roots from the earth in which it must go or surround the mind with images and ideas of a life which is alien to that in which it must physically move. So if anything has to be brought in from outside, it must not be forced on the mind. So bringing in a more localized approach to knowledge is what he is talking about. The mother again has built upon a lot of these thoughts. There are excellent essays by Shri Aurobindo and the mother on education. Those are all must reads. Then she here, this is a long essay where she talks about physical education, the vital education, the emotional education, intellectual and the spiritual component, and basically the supramental education. So she in this particular passage she talks about the spiritual education, and she says that in contrast with the types of education we have mentioned previously, which progress from below upwards by an ascending movement, the spiritual education actually progresses above downwards, like an upasana process or an avatara process. It's like a descent, right? Its influence spreading from one state of being to another until it reaches the physical. So it takes a while for it to manifest in the physical, basically because it is descending from above. And for these will be the last to change. The physical will be the last to change, and the supramental force can be at work in an individual long before anything of it becomes perceptible in his bodily life. To sum up, one can say that supramental education will result no longer in a progressive formation of human nature, like step by step, right, and an increasing development of its latent faculties, but in a complete transformation of the nature itself, a transfiguration of the being in its entirety, a new ascent of the species above and beyond man towards Superman, leading in the end to the appearance of a divine race. Such beautiful envisioning of mankind that Shri Aurobindo and the mother had done in terms of a very, very fundamental transformation of the quality of the being itself. And then there was a question to the mother, should we introduce Aurobindo's books, Aurobindo's thoughts, his words, his story, whatever it is, right? And then she says, it's not about a question of preparing to read these works or other works. It's a question of pulling all those who are capable to do so out of the general human routine of thought, feeling, and action. And it is to give opportunities to those who are here to cast off from the slavery to the human way of thinking and doing. It is to teach all those who want to listen that there is another and truer way of living, that Shri Aurobindo has taught us how to live and become a true being. And that the aim of the education here is to prepare the children and make them fit for that kind of a life. So basically, developing the capability to understand the Vakya of the Rishis, imbibe the Vakya of the Rishis, which dawns from above and not just like a step-by-step process. Of course, Gandhiji has spoken a lot about education, primary education, in fact. In today's world, in the social media, there is a lot of debate about whether to subscribe to Gandhiji's views or not to subscribe to Gandhiji's views. There's so much going on the public front. But nevertheless, he presented very powerful ideas and implemented. Vinoba Bhave has implemented many of these thought processes. When you go to visit the places, you will see how this is practically being implemented. So as a student of IKS, definitely when you come to Bharat, make sure you visit some of these centers of learning, whether it is the Jantar Mantar, where it's a huge astronomical laboratory, or whether it is the Brihadishwara temple, which is a testimony of IKS, or the various gurukulas which are built on these philosophical thought processes. So Gandhiji's basic education, which is primary education, therefore, I've just taken from the passage, there is a lot of content about that. An embodiment of his perception of ideal society consisting of small, self-reliant communities, with his ideal citizen being an industrious, self-respecting and generous individual living in a small cooperative community. So he places a lot of importance to vocational education, where a gurukula or a learning space will not just teach theoretical knowledge, will actually bring out practical knowledge, which will help in the self-sustenance of that education space itself. So Naib Talim also envisaged a different role for a new teacher, not simply as a professional constrained by curricula, but rather as a person relating directly to the student in the form of dialogue, building a rapport with the student. And he who learns also from the student. Whenever I talk with someone, I learn from him. I take from him more than I give him. In this way, a true teacher regards himself as a student of his students. If you will teach your pupils with this attitude, you will benefit more from them. So basically, it brings a lot of deep relationship between the teacher and the taught. Nightalling was popularly and correctly described as an education through handicrafts. This was part of the truth. The root of this new education went much deeper. It lay in the application of truth and love in every variety of human activity, whether an individual or corporate one. The notion of education through handicraft rose from contemplation of truth and love permeating life's activities. Basically, not rejecting them as something lowly, mean, right? He was talking about Harijans, he was talking about different aspects of the society. So he brought in handicrafts as a very important part. Such an education does not depend on books. It had no relation to sectional religion. And literacy is not the end of education, not even the beginning. It is only one of the means where a man and woman can be educated. I would therefore begin the child's education by teaching it a useful handicraft and enabling it to produce from the moment it begins its training. Thus, every school can be made self-supporting, the condition the state takes over manufactures of these schools, right? He describes an elaborate process what he can teach at these stages. How, for example, spinning, he describes his experience of learning the charaka, leading a self-reliant life, and how children can actually learn and sustain their livelihood through this process. So with this, we stop for today. You can see that there is a plethora of ideas with respect to IKS education pedagogy, and this still continues in our country thanks to the efforts of thousands of masters who are keen in offering the wisdom of the Rishis to the generations of today. Namaste.
Thank you, Smriti ji. Before we start the Q&A, or if people have any comments, I want to make 3 announcements in case people start dropping off. The first one is that the next session is the 5th session in the first module about Bharatiya education. We will send out team-wise division and the topics, and the intent in the next session is to present your views on one of those topics, but you'll be working together as a team. Our folks in the KSI group are working towards making the teams, and we'll send it out. Watch out for a message in WhatsApp or in email in the next few hours. Okay, for sure by the end of today. So that's the first announcement. You'll be on all the details of how much material to prepare and what we expect in terms of the time duration of your presentation. Everything will be mentioned in the message. Okay, so that's the first announcement. Second announcement is that next week we will delay the class by 30 minutes because our Acharya has a prior commitment. So we will start at 7:30 a.m. Central Time, not 7 a.m. We will send a reminder, of course, but it will start 30 minutes later just for next week. The third announcement is that Smriti ji will be here in Texas starting first weekend of March, or maybe the second weekend, I should say. But in any case, we will be having an in-person meet sometime. In-person meet sometime. We will let you know as soon as possible, so the maximum number of people can meet and discuss face to face and kind of get to know each other. So some kind of an in-person mixer, and we'll send you information on that as well very soon. Right? Okay. If anyone has any questions or comments, please speak up.
I can easily. Hindi is my matrabhasha. There is one Bhai Sahab who is a Hindi speaker. You can team me with him.
Sure, ji, no problem. Anything else about today's class? Yes, DCG.
Yes. I think the pathway of education, or reimagining all the ones that I just heard today, I think it's going to take time for me to digest in terms of the delivery of education here in the US right now, because I'm also in the education system, and I'm trying to learn a lot more things as just what I heard. Uh, you know, it's more process centric, like what Smriti ji was saying, and it's also cost concerned. Push, like it was mentioned in the books, right? So individualized experience is a huge challenge in the setting that we are in right now. So I'm still trying to digest how to approach this, because cost is always driving the factors, in the modern world. Without a process, and you're trying to, think more from a manufacturing side and applying into education. Why it is not applicable is obviously known, and every individual is, different, and they have different experience in life. And if you had to cater them in that way, you should have unlimited finances to accomplish that. So how do we meet to a balanced, how do we bring in the balanced approach in this current society that we are in? Granted that everything is, dictated by the state and the federal government in terms of throwing money at education has not solved the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking in that sense, like,
Yeah.
what could be a potential research that we could possibly do using this approach?
There have been several, I'm going to say a few things, some of which might be, maybe might kind of raise some eyebrows here, right? So there are models here, right? We are not unique in this. Every community that embarks on this journey requires both Dhana Shakti and Jana Shakti, right? That Dhana Shakti comes from patronage by the rulers. In our case, in the modern world, it's a government and so on. But a lot of it also comes as part of the community itself, right? We have kind of forgotten as a community as to how to get together and be open to contributing for some of the important causes. There's a lot of reluctance, there's a lot of examination and excessive introspection when it comes to some of these things. Not to say it should not happen, but there's, we kind of grapple with this lack of funds many a time, and some of it is kind of, something for us to introspect and check.
Thank you, G. Actually, that is precisely what I'm dealing with right now in my consulting practice. In the district here in Austin, there's a long list of people that are donating and foundations. They're throwing money at a specific cause, and at the same time, the state is pulling all the questioning, and they it's really happening right now, and I'm in the middle of it. I'm process consulting for them, for lack of better words.
Maybe that's something that we need to, you need to share your experience at some point, in a larger context, so we can all learn from it and come together. Some other communities and religions have mandated